All right, it is time for another episode of the Gold Standard with Charlie Goldsmith, who covers the Bengals and the Reds and other sports sometimes for Fox 19 Now. Charlie, how you doing, man?
Doing well. How about you?
I'm doing good. Filling in for Joe D today. Getting a day off, and Joe, you deserve it. Happy to fill in today with Charlie G. Okay, we have a lot to get to. The national talker right now that we will not overlook, we can't overlook, maybe we'd like to, but we won't, is what Joe Burrow is saying and has said in the past week or so in his recent press conferences. And to sum it up, if you've been living under a giant rock, Joe Burrow has said that he likes to play for the Bengals, wants to play for the Bengals at least for one more year. As for his entire career, he says he has a lot on his mind. What do you make right now, Charlie, of everything Joe Burrow has been saying to the fans, to the media, to the organization?
What I hear him saying, but not saying, is fix the defense. If the Bengals had a better, more functional and effective plan to rebuild their defense going off the 2022 run, heading into now the present, the Bengals would be winning, and I think Joe Burrow would be happy. Something I feel as well with his demeanor is Joe Burrow, as we all know, is a Super Bowl guy, is a championship elite competitor, as high of a standard as you can be. 80% of the Bengals roster has never played in a playoff game with Cincinnati before. It's only 12 total guys who have ever been there with Burrow before. So these guys are still figuring out how to tackle. These guys are still figuring out how does it feel to really come through and pull through, and what do I need to do to make sure that happens in big games. Most of the team is at that stage of their career. Burrow obviously is at a much different spot.
Joe Burrow seems like he is sending a message. The one thing that he seems somewhat bothered by and annoyed by is that everyone is saying in different ways, Charlie, hey, Joe, stop playing football. Whether it means coming back from injury or stop playing for the Bengals, or maybe he wants to retire like Andrew Luck. Whatever it is, Joe Burrow seems put off by that. That should be comfort to Bengals fans. He wants to play ball, mentioned playing into his 40s, mentioned Aaron Rodgers and Joe Flacco and all those guys. But he certainly is sending a message. Do you think Joe Burrow has the kind of power, Charlie, to finally help this organization move from where they've been, essentially the last 3 years, into a different era, a full heel turn to make things better?
Yes, but it's interesting and it's much different than it was last offseason. So last offseason, we all felt Joe Burrow's power as the Bengals brought back T. Higgins, as they brought back Mike Gesicki. But the type of change that's next for the Bengals is like changing the types of traits you value in the draft and contract structure and guarantees. And this isn't even as much football stuff. It feels to me more like business stuff is how I view kind of the next step in the evolution of the Bengals organization. So, it'd be easier if it was football stuff and Burrow could just say, hey, Zach Taylor, let's run more 2 tight end sets. But I see it much harder for a quarterback to enact that type of change about decisions that are only made at the ownership level.
And I think a lot of people, when you talk about Duke Tobin and concerns around, is he the right guy to continue to be the pseudo GM of the Bengals? Well, you might go back to, let's go back to what happened in 2021, right? When they were able to add key players on defense, guys like Trey Hendrickson, and help this team make a Super Bowl and then almost get back again. But you wrote a story on this. This season, in some ways, for this entire organization, what are the words? A wake-up call for this organization, right?
That's what Bengals running back Chase Brown told me. It was a wake-up call, and that's how a lot of their better players view this. But I think how they view it kind of from Zach Taylor, from the top, is this just was a rebuilding season. Like, they're not going to look at this and say, and a lot of guys told this to me on the record, oh, we're close, just a couple games, a couple injuries that prevented us, they'll say, from being where we want to go. They say no, this year felt different. It was also a year where they prioritized playing and developing young players and empowering young players to lead the team. They made a lot of moves that are meant to optimize 2026 and 2027 over optimizing 2025. We saw that, we felt that, and that's what makes this year different, and a sign to me that change is already going on in terms of how they want to approach this rebuild.
And for all the fans, and we know there are a lot of them, calling for Zach's head and Duke's head, it doesn't feel like change is coming. So then the question becomes, what does change look like? And I know you've kind of already alluded to that, but here's the bottom line. To go back to what I said about 2021 and those offseason acquisitions, you didn't have Joe Burrow's contract. You didn't have T. Higgins' contract and Jamar Chase's and all those things in the mix. So it will look different. But how can things change if the same people are at the top?
I don't even care what changes. You know what I care about? I care that the Bengals get a pass rushing defensive tackle. I care that the Bengals get a veteran in the room at linebacker. I care that they get a playmaking free safety. I think they need to get more versatility at corner. They need to continue to invest in guard. I don't even care, to be honest, about the contract structure stuff and all that. Now, all of that feeds into this.
Right.
But what the Bengals need is more good players, and they need their approach and priorities and finding and wrapping up the deals with those players to have a different success rate than it had in the past. You can change but still end up with Sheldon Rankins or Geno Stone. You need to change and end up with the next version of Von Bell, Mike Hilton, Chidobe Awuzie.
Yeah. So we were talking about this off camera, and to kind of put a cap on this part of the conversation, this Bengals season in a lot of ways, I don't know how often you've dated in your past, Charlie, feels like a high-maintenance relationship.
Sure.
It's one of those where you're thinking, I want out of this. Another example might be if you are potentially, let's just say, in a tank and the water is filling up and there's only this much breathing room if you're watching on camera at the top, where you feel like you're running out of air.
I don't like that your parallel is that dating is just like drowning.
Well, the high maintenance relationship can be, and I had a couple of them, where it feels like you are running out of air, and what's going to happen because we are almost out of air and about to drown. That's what this season feels like. And to me, just to digress for a second, I've covered this team for 12 years. This has been the most exhausting season that I have covered in my 12 years in Cincinnati for a lot of reasons. And added into that equation is whatever Joe Burrow says right now is a lightning rod, a bullhorn to the national media, then dissecting what he says and then turns back into what happens the next press conference. It's exhausting. I'm over
Hang in there.
I'm over it, Charlie. But for you, and as a media member, and for maybe fans listening, how do you process this in a healthy manner, considering it feels like the sky is constantly falling this season?
I lean a lot on the film because what is really going wrong and who are really the people that are the problem? And something I've done a specific watch of is, all right, was this Al Golden having a bad scheme and bad play calling? Or were these just guys who can't make the plays? And frankly, what I saw was a lot of guys who just can't make the plays. And in terms of processing this, I don't know, we've had a lot of time to criticize the plays the rookie linebackers have made. I'm still making an effort to cover this team by also trying to find some stories and some fun, some lighthearted, some human interest, because that just helps get you through the season.
Right.
But it all just goes back to feeling like the rookie linebackers at the end of the day. I
just want people to hear and understand that we are trying to do our best. I know people are just calling for the firing of Zach and Duke and rage, but, somehow you have to mentally process this in a healthy way, whether you're a media member, whether you're a player like Joe Burrow, or whether you're a diehard fan. Many of you are. Okay, let's spin a little positive here. You had a conversation with Al Golden talking about DJ Turner, and you posted this quote. Do you recall the quote you posted?
Progress is a choice.
Progress is a choice, talking about DJ Turner and his season. That is a very impactful statement. Can you expound on that?
Well, DJ went through the process that Al even alluded later. Like, all the things DJ Turner did, we need Shamar Stewart to do that. DJ lost his starting spot. All right, how are you going to handle this? How are you going to respond? Can you take the next steps just in terms of the maturity with your approach in your career? And DJ, just to be honest, developed a different look in his eye, a newfound confidence. He started carrying himself differently. You could feel a change that was really backed up by his process, by his preparation, by his film study, and all the attention to detail that was veteran-like, stuff that he learned from Chidobe Awuzie that he really put into practice. And it's everyone deciding, making the choice to take seriously that journey and knowing how to be a pro. That's the next step for Shamar Stewart, Chris Jenkins, the next step for Myles Murphy, the next step for these rookie linebackers. They can all look to DJ Turner and say, that's how you do it.
You mentioned Myles Murphy, 4.5 sacks this season. He's a guy that, I will be honest, I did not see it happening for him before the season started. And he's showing growth. And it's not just the 4.5 sacks. It's the tip ball that leads to a Demetrius Knight interception. It's plays like that. It's pressure. Are we seeing something that shows promise for him, considering they're going to need the guy with Trey leaving soon?
What's been most encouraging to me has been the physicality that he's shown setting the edge. He's demonstrated a gear of toughness and physicality that he hadn't yet. Now the sacks themselves, I'll be a bit critical of because he's getting a lot of his pressures when tight ends block him, and you need to be able to pass rush against offensive tackles. And he hasn't really had success as the featured guy on a play. Like, think of it as like the Jamar Chase, like, go get the ball, go get the quarterback. Miles isn't quite there yet, but he is a nice quality rotational piece who is still growing as he figures things out with his mental game. So I think he's clearly solidified his spot in a prominent role in 2026.
That's why I really appreciate the film study from Charlie, because it's, look, everyone is going to say, look at the sacks, look at the numbers, and I think it helps to just say, okay, understand the situation he was in. A lot like if you wanted to dissect Trey Hendrickson and his sack numbers last year, a lot of times it was, sure, he had 17 and a half sacks, but look at when they came. That also helps for context. Okay, let's flip things now to the Reds, where hope springs eternal, thinking about spring training and
nice change of pace,
warm sunshine in Arizona, whatever it might be for you, a Reds baseball season. The Reds do add a bullpen arm, a lefty, and Caleb Ferguson. What does that do for the Reds right now?
Well, it kind of changes how Terry Francona can manage the bullpen in 2026. Because the Reds didn't have a useful lefty in 2025. Yeah. They thought they had Taylor Rogers. What a massive bust. They thought they'd have Sam Mull. Took a huge step back last season. So Terry Francona managed the bullpen all right. Graham Ashcraft's the 7th inning guy. Tony Santillan's the 8th inning guy. Emilio Pagan's the 9th inning guy. That hamstrung you a bit, especially because it also kind of forced you to pitch those guys every time those situations came up. And when the star lefties on the other teams came up, to hit, you were throwing a right-handed pitcher at him. So this year, maybe it could be Caleb Ferguson some nights in the 8th. Maybe it's in the 6th to get you out of a jam. He gives you so much more flexibility and creativity in your bullpen. And he's good. Like, he was ESPN's 47th ranked free agent. I did a total big board heading into free agency of relievers, and Ferguson was my top lefty. So nice move by the Reds.
You were at the winter meetings, and I don't want to move past this. You were all over the Kyle Schwarber story. It did not happen. What did you take away from how that played out and how aggressive the Reds really were in that situation?
Yeah, they would have had a completely, like if it were a fork in the road, they would have gone down a completely polar opposite road for Schwarber than what they're doing now. And the Schwarber interest on both sides was real, not as real as the Phillies. And I don't get the sense the offer was as strong as the Phillies either, but it was real enough to get a multi-hour meeting between Schwarber and the Reds, including Bob Castellini. That doesn't just happen. But the Phillies gave Schwarber a bigger contract than even I was expecting. To land Schwarber, the Reds would have had to have gotten really creative from a payroll standpoint. Maybe it's trading some guys, maybe it's managing all sorts of contracts differently, renegotiating, all that kind of stuff. So now they're doing none of that, and they're working with just the little flexibility they had in the first place. And instead of getting that power bat that they still need, the course they've gone down is this is a bullpen where with the limited resources they have, the offseason with the limited resources they have has been all about the bullpen.
If you don't know, Charlie G is very plugged into UC and Xavier as well. If you're watching on camera, he's split right down the middle. Is that accurate? Okay, yes. So I don't want to talk about Xavier so much right now. They got blown out in their Big East opener, the worst loss.
I left at halftime.
You were there, okay.
They were down 27. I felt like it was safe.
The worst loss in Cintas history. Was terrible to open things. On the flip side, you have a UC basketball team who is struggling mightily as well. And Jizzle James comes back into the fold, has a big night on Wednesday against a lower-level team. We get it. But my question for you about UC and about Jizzle James, with him coming back as one of their best, if not their best player, does it make UC competitive in the Big 12 again?
I don't mean to psychoanalyze the guy. It depends on the headspace that Jizzle James is in. And I'm not even talking about off the court. What we've seen from Jizzle James is a very volatile player. If he's feeling that mid-range jumper and he's just got a hot hand that day and he's got that extra bounce off the dribble, we've seen days where that gives you a true dynamic spark that can lead to you being a nice quality, well above average point guard in the Big 12. When it's not Jizzle James's night, we've seen him go play way too fast. The shot selection's frustrating. The turnovers pile up. You shift the offense because you need to get the ball back in the steadying hands of Day Thomas, which lessens the upside of your offense. As much as I respect Day, a great role player, less than a true dynamic point guard. So can Jizzle be the guy who he's shown flashes of being for 2 years, or is he still in the space where the lack of consistency will be who he's been for 2 years? Very encouraging start from what I saw, but every time UC, except for one exception, has played these low major teams, all their guys have looked like stars. So I think we'll know very quickly in the Big 12 schedule whether or not Jizzle James has got it right now.
The mental side will definitely be the question mark, and a good point by you. Okay, time for the Gold Rush, and I want to ask you first a question back to the Reds. What is, if the Reds don't seem like they're really into being all that busy in the offseason, what is something that could be a realistic move for them to help their lineup or their defense possibly?
Well, the problem is they don't have a ton to trade. And I've now view it as like $2 to $5 million left to spend in free agency based on what they've told us their budget is. Now, like Rob Refsnyder probably would be my favorite free agent for the Reds, who's a guy you've probably never heard of. But he's a platoon guy, and that's where they're looking right now. Okay. On the trade market, everyone wants them to trade a starter for a position player. They don't see themselves as having that surplus. So you're kind of stuck now from a position player perspective on the trade market. They'd probably have to make some money flexibility work, but like the Orioles just signed Pete Alonso. That means they have a nice, solid first baseman, Ryan Mountcastle, who needs to go somewhere. That's how the Reds got Gavin Lux last year. The Dodgers got a second baseman, and Lux was available. The Mets will probably be active this offseason. I bet that'll squeeze out some opportunity they have this group of intriguing, solid, kind of nice young guys. Beatty, Mauricio, Acuna. Are one of those guys available in the trade? Like looking for those types of guys, maybe with some upside, maybe with some downside, maybe with some experience, maybe less experience. Trying to find some creative deal, like another Will Benson type move, which really worked in 2023. That's where I'm looking right now.
We talked before the show about your love for candy. What is one of your favorite candies?
I've gotten really into recently the Circle peach rings.
Oh, yeah.
The gummy peach rings.
Yeah.
Really good.
Very light and fluffy.
Yeah.
Okay, if you had to put all your peach rings
Great
on one Bengals defensive rookie to be a starter next year, and not just a starter, but a great player, put all your peach rings on a Shamar Stewart, Demetrius Knight, a Barrett Carter, whatever it might be, who you cashing in on?
I guess Demetrius Knight. So like my plan at linebacker is you bring back Oren Burks, but really let him compete for a spot with Demetrius next year. And then you bring in, let's call it like a linebacker one.
Okay.
Who, now if Barrett then pops in camp, you could play this guy next to Barrett Carter.
Yeah.
You could find a way to make that work. It's been a really disappointing rookie year for all these guys. So I'm not investing or making a bet in any of those guys right now. But if you had to, just because his draft pedigree and his backhanded compliment, Demetrius has significantly made the fewest terrible plays. Demetrius Knight.
Okay, two more for the Gold Rush. What offseason Bengals drama are you least looking forward to?
I've got a good one.
Okay.
You ready for this? This will
ready.
be peak February. What do the Bengals need to do at backup quarterback?
It's coming.
And should they spend those $5 million? Joe Flacco costs $4 million. Should they spend those $4 or $5 million on their backup quarterback? Or a starting right guard? Like that's what Dalton Reisner will cost. And that's a very existential question, isn't it? Do you invest in protecting Joe Burrow, or have you resigned yourself to the fact that Burrow will get hurt and you need to invest in the guy who will fill in for Joe Burrow? That's pretty dark.
Okay, that's so good. Last one. What do you know about Pokemon?
Nothing.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
We had this conversation with Joe Burrow about his birthday gift. He still hasn't opened the Pokemon box, whatever the heck it is, that he got for his birthday. And I asked a question about Pokemon figurines, and Joe said I needed to do my research, so I'll do better on that. I didn't know, because you're a fairly odd parents guy, right?
Well, I wouldn't say that's connected to Pokemon.
It's not connected at all. I'm just thinking about things that Charlie
Fairly
likes.
Odd Parents, I like that.
Okay.
I like all the shows that were on and good when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Pokemon was not one of them.
I never did Pokemon myself. Okay. Time for the gold nugget to wrap this up. Charlie, what do you got for us?
I don't have much on the Bengals side. It hasn't been a nugget type thing. I'm just going to give a shout out real quick to all the former Reds assistant coaches who I know who are now getting great jobs this offseason. Joe Singley, Jeff Pickler, Alon Leichman, Simon Matthews. I don't have any good Bengals Nugget right now. So let's give a shout out to those guys who are friends of the gold standard, who are now going on and doing great things, building on their success with the Reds.
And I don't want you to move past that, okay? If you're thinking, I didn't get a lot from that nugget, understand this is how much relationships mean in this business, how much it matters to have good contacts and not just have a guy that you shake hands with and say, see you later, that you stay in touch with them. You know those names. You obviously wish them well. Mm-hmm. Relationships matter, do they not?
I would say that's a defining thing of how I approach this shop.
Okay.
So
there you go.
Congrats to you guys.
We've had a great time on the Gold Standard. Hope you have as well. As always, we are here for you talking about all things Bengals and Reds and whatever else. He is Charlie G. I'm Jeremy Rao. Thanks for hanging out.